Welcome back to KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM, The Joe Miller Show. We're honored to have with us Dr. Michael Brown. Michael Brown was a Jewish rock drummer, heroin shooting, came to a faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. He's devoted his life to fostering an awakening in the church, sparking moral and cultural revolution in society, and raising up gospel laborers for the nations, and reaching out to his own Jewish people. Interestingly enough, Dr. Brown ended up within the crosshairs of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They labeled his organization a hate group. He's currently president of the Fire School of Ministry. He's a professor of Bible and Hebrew studies at several leading seminaries. We reached out to Dr. Brown due to the fact that we have, coming to Alaska, the Southern Poverty Law Center. They will be at the 2015 annual convention of the Alaska Bar Association. Mark Potok, who's a spokesman for the Southern Poverty Law Center, is going to be there to educate the Bar Association on hate groups and a number of other different areas. Dr. Brown has written some critiques on the Southern Poverty Law Center, given the fact that they have targeted him as being in charge of a hate group. We thought it would be important, given the fact that the Bar Association have found it fit to identify the Southern Poverty Law Center as a legitimate group capable of educating the legal community here, that we start educating people in Alaska about that organization. I welcome Dr. Brown to the show. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks so much.
So tell us a little bit about your background. We just have two short segments with you, so I want to get into the Southern Poverty Law Center. But if you could tell our audience a little bit about how you got from point A to point B. I mean, starting out as a rock drummer and heroin shooting to where you're at now.
Yeah, I was radically changed in 1971 as a 16-year-old heroin shooting, LSD-using hippie rock drummer, raised in a conservative Jewish home. The transformation of my life was dramatic, and my dad was thrilled to see it. But he said, look, we're Jews, we don't believe this. He introduced me to the local rabbi. Local rabbi said, great to see these changes in your life, but you're obviously misinformed and wrong. Challenged me that I didn't even know Hebrew, so that led me on the academic path where I got a PhD in Near Eastern languages and literatures from New York University, and because of which I teach at seminaries and do academic work on the Bible. But on the flip side, the spiritual side of things, I was so radically transformed that all the years since then, I've really given myself to practical ministry, wanting to see other people transformed, their lives made whole as well. So in our ministry school, we've raised up, sent out missionaries, doing all kinds of spiritual and humanitarian work around the world. And within the States, on my daily radio show, articles I write, different things, we're always standing for a gospel-based moral and cultural revolution, meaning that biblical principles are life-giving, that marriage as God intended it is best. So we stand for these things in the public square. We speak out against things that we feel are detrimental and negative, while always pointing to a gospel-based solution. So that's what we've been doing in ministry and writing and preaching and teaching and through media for decades now. And somehow, because of our stances, in particular having to do with homosexual activism, it wasn't the group that I had up, but I myself got listed by the SPLC as one of the 30 new activists heading up the radical right. And on the list were men like Malik Zulu Shabazz, who was then the leader of the new Black Panther Party, David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, white supremacists, neo-Nazis, others like that. I was on the same list as people like Shabazz and like Duke, and it's simply because I differ with the goals of homosexual activism, even though they said about me on their site that I'm different than the others and I don't use these exaggerated statements and I tend to footnote everything. But my crime was being, quote, anti-gay, or as they'd say now, anti-LGBT. And, of course, you have fine family ministries, organizations like the Family Research Council. When they have an annual event, they have speakers including senators, governors, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and yet because they stand against the goals of homosexual activism, the SPLC has branded them a hate group. So you have an organization, the SPLC, that in years past did a lot of good in exposing legitimate hate groups, KKK and neo-Nazi groups, various white supremacists, to the point that FBI, law enforcement, military would use their listings. But now they are partnering to demonize and vilify Christian organizations that hold to biblical values, such as marriage is the union of a man and a woman, the only thing we've known through our history. Now, if you hold to these things and speak truthfully about homosexual practice, you are now a hater or part of a hate group, and it's downright dangerous what they're doing.
Again, Dr. Brown talking about the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's been invited to the Alaska Bar Association's annual convention in May. Now, one of the concerns that I have, Dr. Brown, is that the SPLC, in taking these fairly extreme actions, I would say, against what are really just legitimate conservative groups, they're actually assisted by the federal government to some extent. They've received federal funding. Isn't that right?
Yeah, not only federal funding, they have a massive income. Hundreds of millions of dollars comes in through the network they've built. And they're going after organizations. Some of them got budgets of tens of thousands of dollars, and they're getting put on their list. So they are tremendously well-funded. And although the FBI within the last year or so has stepped back from using them officially the way they did before, they have been regularly used by the U.S. government. So you want to find out, I'll tell you honestly, I was honored to be on their list in terms of I knew it was because I was doing right. At the same time, I wrote an open letter to Mark Potok because we reached out and said, let's dialogue, let's talk. I was going to expose their errors. Never received any feedback, response, anything. I invited them on the radio show. Let's talk, because I'm all about putting facts on the table. No such thing. But I travel around the world, and I always wonder, honestly, when I give them my passport, is something going to pop up because of these extreme, dangerous things that groups like the SPLC are doing?
Well, it is pretty frightening. One of the things that is pretty shocking to me, too, is that you could have a group like the Alaska Bar Association look to this organization as basically being the authority on extremism when they've taken such a step to even with FRC, which I don't think anybody, especially given political leadership and its involvement with FRC, could characterize as an extreme or hate group, and yet they've apparently gotten away with it, and they continue to have legitimacy. I mean, as recently as last year, a year and a half ago, with the shooting at the FRC, the guy that came in there said that, right, and he got his information apparently from the SPLC website, and didn't seem to be much in the way of the media covering that. Isn't it true that the SPLC has significant support in mainstream media for what they do?
Oh, absolutely. To the extent that there is a strong left-leaning ideology in the mainstream media, which is well known and not hidden in any way. To that extent, they are the champions. They are heroes, and they have partnered quite directly and quite overtly with aggressive gay activist groups. For example, December 2nd, 2011, they partnered with a group called Truth Wins Out, which is as extreme on the pro-gay activist vilifying, demonizing side of anyone you could imagine. I participated in an event a couple of years ago where we gave out 2,500 bottles of water that said Jesus loves you at a gay pride event, as a result of which Truth Wins Out blasted me as trying to provoke an armed conflict and calling me an anti-gay monster. SPLC partnered with them, ran an ad in a local D.C. newspaper saying, has anyone ever tried to cure you of being gay? Share your story. Help expose the lies behind the conversion therapy, and help other LGBT people who have undergone or are considering therapy to cure themselves. So if you have someone with unwanted same-sex attraction that goes to a professional counselor and said, I'd like help in doing this, the SPLC currently has a lawsuit in New Jersey trying to ban this, to say it's an illegal practice even for an adult with unwanted same-sex attraction to get counseling from a professional psychologist or therapist. That's how extreme the SPLC is. And yes, they literally have blood on their hands, because by characterizing Christian groups, Christian ministries, family-based organizations as hate groups, they can provoke an unstable man like Floyd Conklin, who goes in with the intent of carrying out an act of mass murder at FRC headquarters in D.C. And by his own testimony, he found out about them and found where they were on the hate map of the SPLC.
Yeah, and no accountability taken. No, I mean, the media not hardly anything out there except for, of course, on the conservative sites. Anyway, we got to take a break. But again, SPLC coming to Alaska, Southern Poverty Law Center. They're actually the keynote speakers. Mark Potok is a senior fellow at the SPLC, and according to the Bar Association website, he's going to discuss issues of free speech in the context of racial hatred, supposedly just racial hatred. I'm sure it's going to get broader than that. It is helpful, and then it goes on to say, what is the best approach in dealing with hate groups and their demonizing propaganda and conspiracy theories in the age of the Internet? Next day, there's another segment with them regarding the militia movement. We're going to talk more about that and the SPLC, Dr. Brown's experiences. After these messages, stay with us. Welcome back to 1080 AM, 95.1 FM, The Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk. We're on the air with Dr. Brown. Dr. Michael Brown came to faith as a 16-year-old, was a heroin-shooting Jewish rock drummer, raised in a conservative Jewish family, had a radical transformation experience, is now working in areas of religious faith, working to awaken the church, wants to spark a moral and cultural revolution in society, raising up gospel laborers for the nation. He is the president of the Fire School of Ministry, has his doctorate in Hebrew, and has found himself the target, because of his views, of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and as a result has written a paper on that and is also providing information to people like us about the dangers of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Southern Poverty Law Center, as I mentioned last segment, is going to be here in Alaska in May. It's the keynote for the Alaska Bar Association convention in May, and is also providing education to Alaskan lawyers on extremism. Dr. Brown, thanks for staying with us. I appreciate you giving us your time and being willing to talk about this important issue.
Look, we need to put the facts on the table, because the SPLC got its reputation by reporting on violent anti-government groups and racist groups in America. So that they got their reputation. They became the gold standard. You go to them to find out who are these violent groups, who are these dangerous racist groups, and then they start to put Christian groups on the list. So people think, oh, if the SPLC says so, they've got to be dangerous, they've got to be bad, they've got to be equally violent. Well, there's a professor at the University of North Texas named George Yancey, and he said he wasn't arguing either way about whether the Christian groups should be on the list or not, but what he demonstrated was that SPLC's outrage was completely subjective and selective, and none of the radical progressive groups, none of the radical left-wing groups that demonize their opponents, that put out all kinds of misinformation, that could even be potentially dangerous, none of them were on their list. So Professor Yancey concluded that the reason that the SPLC cannot or will not change its criteria, or at least begin including left-wing groups on its hate list, is that it cannot go against its progressive donors who are sending in such sizable sums, $38.5 million a year, with $256 million in assets, feeding salaries for the leaders of over $300,000. So they're getting this left-wing money, and conspicuously, the left-wing hate groups aren't on the list. The only groups that are on the list are right-wing groups, and then on the Christian side, conservative Christian groups. You look at that does not speak of unbiased reporting. That speaks of bias, that speaks of corruption, and that speaks of real potential danger because of the influence that they still have in certain circles.
Right. So do you have some examples of any of the groups that are left-leaning that should have been on the list that aren't?
Well, this was Professor Yancey's study that I was referring to. I don't have specifics in front of me, but I can tell you firsthand that there are gay activist groups that I've dealt with firsthand that will vilify you. For example, Truth Wins Out, that will vilify you in the ugliest ways. They've accused me of trying to provoke an armed conflict at gay pride events as we handed out bottles of water saying Jesus loves you. they will vilify people in the most ungodly, despicable ways, shameful ways. They're just one group that's out there. I mean, there are quite a few, even that would be in the radical gay activist camp, but they work. SPLC doesn't just not mention them. SPLC works with them and co-sponsors projects with them. So you couldn't talk about a stronger hypocritical bias than that.
Unbelievable. And again, they're here in Alaska in May speaking. The keynote at the Bar Association's convention is entitled Hate, Free Speech, and the Battle Against Extremism. And, if this is not the fox guarding the hen house, I mean, they obviously don't want free speech on the issue of, some of these fundamental family type issues such as gay marriage, traditional family. I mean, that's completely counter to what their perspective is. It would be interesting. I'm not going to help support the group by actually being at that keynote, but it's going to be interesting to hear what he has to say just by some of my colleagues that may go as to whether or not he believes that there should be, when I say he, I'm talking about Mark Potok, who's the actual representative of the SPLC, who will be at that convention, what he's going to say about, whether or not free speech should be inclusive of criticism of the gay movement. But it's my guess, based upon what they've been doing with respect to these Christian groups, that they're going to maintain that society should do everything it can to shut down such speech.
Look, they are engaged right now in a lawsuit against a Jewish organization called Jonah in New Jersey. I mentioned it the last segment, wanting to make it illegal for someone to get counseling or therapy to help them deal with unwanted same-sex attraction. I mean, I can't think of something that is more radical than saying you don't have the right to get counseling to resolve tensions and issues in your life. This has nothing to do with free speech. This has nothing to do with open communication. This has to do with censoring opposing views. Look, obviously that they have certain groups on there that would be maybe a radical, violent Islamic group or something like that, but they also have on their list of hate individuals or hate groups people that speak out against radical Islam, people that expose radical Islam on a daily basis. They're on the same list as being haters. So the liberal extreme ideology is such that they say when you put out documented information that differs with their talking points, you are disseminating hate. When you scientifically document areas having to do with homosexual practice, for example, if you want to point to the fact that men having sex with men is more dangerous than men having sex with women, there are more related sexually transmitted diseases and other problems, obviously from our perspective, because God did not design a man to be with another man. So there are going to be more issues like that. You just put out the factual information, the massively high percentage of HIV among gay men as compared to the heterosexual population. You put out truthful information like that. You put out truthful information that kids do best with a mom and dad. You are now branded a hate group. And let's realize where this could go when we think about the Bar Association. Trinity Western University in British Columbia, Canada, started a law school, and they have a community covenant that students and teachers have to sign that says you have to abstain from sex outside of marriage. And even though they're in Canada, they say marriage is the union of a man and a woman. Well, that ran afoul of Canada's law societies, and this is now a year ago. The Law Society of Canada's largest province voted against admitting among their ranks graduates of Trinity Western University. They ended up having a vote by the Bar Association which overwhelmingly said, we will not recognize this university's law degrees because they hold to marriage being the union of a man and a woman. That's the power of a Bar Association. Yep. And
well, not only that,
in Alaska.
Right. And, and there are a number of Christian law schools in the United States, 3 or 4 of them. And, of course, I'm sure that they're very concerned about what they've seen, of course, north of the border, but also this anti-First Amendment approach to these issues. One of the concerns as a lawyer here in Alaska with the Bar Association bringing this group up is that, the Bar Association has a whole number of rules of conduct. You have the professional rules of conduct, for example. You also have ethics opinions that are adopted by the Bar Association. And very frequently, obviously, I mean, there are nuances, there are subjective things that will be opined upon as to whether or not this is proper conduct for a lawyer. And you can already see this radical agenda creeping in other areas, but now to actually invite the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, to be the keynote for their convention in May, it's signaling that this bar association may be moving even more dramatically in that direction, and that Christian attorneys in this state better watch out.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, let's realize how radically things have shifted in a very short period of time. We are not being Chicken Little saying the sky's falling here. It was just last year that Dr. Ben Carson got put on the SPLC hate list. And then when there was an outcry about it, when O'Reilly found out about it and there was a national outcry, they pulled it. They pulled his name. But this is how extreme they are. We must expose it. And when they refuse to even have dialogue with those they differ with, they will demonize you and not even interact. And when you call them on the facts, they won't even interact. That's really an abuse of power. What we want to have is civil dialogue and discussion of facts, and they are actually suppressing it.
Well, Dr. Brown, I appreciate your insights. Keep up the good fight, obviously. Don't stand down on this. I mean, obviously, we need more people speaking out. We need more people in the public to know about this. I mean, when we have groups like the Alaska Bar Association giving legitimacy to an organization like this, it just lends itself to more problems. It's something that we've got to expose. We'll continue to work that direction. Thank you, Dr. Brown. I appreciate your time on this important subject. Stay with us. The Joe Miller Show, back with you after these messages.